for supporting Foundation events over the years. And I also want to thank all the Foundation staff and the Foundation volunteers who over the years have helped make our events so successful. This event is a three-way event between the Writers Guild Foundation, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and Humanitas. And we all are dedicated to the art of film and the craft of film, and some of us are dedicated to the writer end of that, and in particular, and especially, and that's particularly Humanitas and the Writers Guild Foundation. And we hope that maybe this is a new thing, this three-way thing, but it's really very exciting for us to have the Academy involved, because we've been doing partnerships with Humanitas for a while, and that has been a really great thing. Can you hear me? I feel like it's not very loud. The Writers Guild Foundation is attached to the Writers Guild, but it is not the same thing as the Writers Guild. And our biggest program is the library at the Writers Guild. It's open to the public. Is there anybody here who has never used that library? Oh, a few people. It's open to the public 5 days a week. We just started opening Saturdays once a month. And it has a really fantastic collection of scripts. And if you want to be a writer, that is really the place to go. The Writers Guild Foundation has some events coming up. In particular, on June the 30th, a Saturday, it has an all-day craft day, a series of panels on writing for film. It's at the Writers Guild Theatre, and you can find out details. There's a great set of people, speakers lined up already, and you can find out about that on the website, which is www.wgfoundation.org. So I think this is the minute where I tell you to turn off your cell phones until you know photography and so forth. Anyway, it really has been a great honor to serve you all and to put on events for you over the last 20 years. And I know that Katie Buckland, who is our new executive director, Katie, stand up, is going to do a really great job and going to bring you lots more really exciting events. And now I'm going to introduce our moderator, Robin Swicord. Robin? Robin's known to many of you. Among other things, she wrote Little Women, The Perez Family, Matilda, Memoirs of a Geisha, and the Jane Austen Book Club, and that's just some of what she wrote. So welcome, Robin. And our panel, one thing, I do have an apology. Stephen Gagan was to have been here tonight, and we just heard that he's held up in Cannes and can't get back in time. So he is at the Cannes Film Festival, so we're really sorry he can't be here. But we have, in no particular order, a bunch of really fantastic screenwriters. We have David Seidler. I'm going to start with him. And Nicholas Meyer. And Paris Qualls. And Lowell Gantz. So have fun, everybody.
Here. No, Angela handed it off. It was very deft, but it was to the wrong person. Okay, so I was watching the Eastern Finals of the NBA last night. I know that's a really surprising statement, but I was. And LeBron James was being interviewed, and the question was something like, what do you do to prepare to go up and make a difficult play at the basket? And he said, first I position myself, and then I look around for my bigs. His bigs meaning the tallest of the towering players that are on his team. And so I got very taken with that little bit of sports lingo, my bigs. And I realized that tonight I was going to get to sit on a panel with some of my bigs. These are the people that when you have a really difficult screenplay to write, These are the Ghostbusters that you call. So I'm really honored to be moderating this panel with them tonight. You have their credits and bios in front of you. I won't make the list, but enjoy. The subject is screenplay envy, the movies that we wish we had written. And we were having a discussion in the green room that it both means those screenplays that you wish you had had the chance to write because you feel that subject so deeply. How dare anyone else write it? And then there's also the screenplays that you just admire so much that you feel like, if only I could have written that. So the topic tonight is sort of going to cover both of that, and I thought to kind of kick it off, I would tell you about a really ignominious example of my own screenplay envy. And I bring it up this year because Ruth Parr Jabvala died in April of this year, and she was a brilliant screenwriter. She wrote many novels. She wrote 23 screenplays. She published 8 short story collections. She did this mostly while living in Delhi, in a country where you still, when she moved there in 1951, women were expected to walk behind their husbands. So she entered a field that she knew very little about, and she kicked off with her first screenplay, the 20-year collaboration with Ishmael Merchant and James Ivory. They made their first movie out of her first screenplay. And in the Guinness Book of World Records, it's the longest collaboration of that kind in film history. So she was someone that I admired until she adapted a novel that I had carried around for 12 years, wanting to adapt and trying to con some producer or studio into optioning it for me, which was Howard's End by E.M. Forster. And when I saw in the trades that she had adapted this book, I put myself into such a state of competitive envy that I didn't know if I could bring myself to go to the theater and see the movie. And then when I saw the movie, I had the most beautiful experience of just giving it up completely to Ruth, who will forever be my personal big for the incredible job that she did in adapting that. She had a master's in English literature. English was not her first language. She grew up in Cologne, Germany. Her family fled the Nazi regime after Kristallnacht, ended up in London. She read Gone with the Wind at an air raid shelter at the age of 14. Decided that English was the perfect age to read Gone with the Wind. Decided that English was her primary language, and she began to write in it. So we will miss her contribution to film because she passed away at the age of 85 in April. So to give you a little bit of a kickoff for how we're going to move from extreme ignominious envy into admiration. As we begin, I would like a little something from anyone here, or all of you, whoever wants to speak, about what part of envy is pure admiration and what part is colored by those feelings of competition. So think about that in terms of the first movie that you want to bring up. And also answer, is there anything that you would have done differently? You're dying to speak. Go, David.
By the way.
Speak into here a bit.
You mean that wives don't walk behind husbands? Sorry. You'll notice I'm divorced.
Yeah. There was a reason.
Gee. Envy. I guess the most envious I've ever felt was when a quartet of novels that I'd been wanting to adapt for at least 30 years was done by Tom Stoppard, who I don't know really whether he had the right to try it, but it was Parade's End. I'm not going to say whether I would have done it better. Of course I would have.
What would you have done differently
No,
is
no,
the
no.
question.
Has one of the great lines in it, "You forgave me without mercy."
It also has one of the greatest bitches in literature. Sylvia Tychens, the wife, is just a marvelous piece of work. She is just wondrous. And I really wanted to write her. But it was done by Rebecca Hall, which isn't really quite what I had in mind. So I would have changed
Who would you
that.
have cast?
Oh, I don't know, but it needed somebody who had the guts to really do. Probably Angelina Jolie would have been wonderful.
Okay, who? Paris, do you have something?
Well, just that anything that you envy, you admire. And I think that you pay particular attention to that because there is something that is striking you, there's something that is grabbing you in that envy, in that state. And I think the deeper you feel it, the more admiration you have for it.
No?
I think, I thought my list was completely free of envy, and then I told it to my wife, and she pointed out that all of the movies on my list had been written before I was a professional screenwriter. So envy probably did enter into it in a big way. So I adjusted and found some movies I wish I had written by some of my contemporaries. But the ones that came to mind almost immediately were movies I saw before I was actually writing and came to admire more and more as I became a writer. My writing partner and I, Babalu Mandel, we keep a copy of a script of The Apartment by Billy Wilder and I.A.L. Diamond on our desk, propped up, just to remind us what we're trying to do, what we're hoping to accomplish. And it literally sits there between us and has for like 25 years. I don't think that has anything actually to do with envy. Wilder and Diamond are our idols, and The Apartment to me is a movie that I particularly love because of what I consider to be the perverse nature of it. And by perverse, I'm not talking about the content. I'm not talking about the characters or the story being perverse, although it was actually roundly criticized for those qualities when it came out 50 years ago. It's perverse to me because having worked in that genre now for a long time, I can watch that movie and hear the studio notes. And you know, well, why do we like him? Why do we care about him? Why do we like her? Why does he like her? Why does she like him? I can watch that movie with you and point out just 17 no's from the studio about what has to be adjusted, what has to be changed. You meet this guy for the first time, Jack Lemmon, and he's sitting in the rain in the park because he hasn't got the guts or the integrity to tell some clown that he can't commit adultery in his apartment. And the young lady played by Shirley MacLaine with whom he's in love is having an adulterous affair herself with a character who is not that exciting. Anytime you make that movie now, that guy has to take her out for a date in a helicopter. So that, you know, so you go, oh, well, you see what he can offer her that she can't get from anybody else. No, she's just made a lousy choice. She's just doing a bad job of running her life. They both are. And why do we like them? Because they're human, and the writers who wrote them believe in them, absolutely. Believe in them 100% sincerely, that they're real And you know, that's what I mean by perverse. The Jack Lemmon character doesn't have a grandpa he visits who's, you know, blind or something that he's nice to, or
So
you know.
is part of the envy that they escaped the studio notes that would have destroyed their screenplay?
There is a part of that that's envy, but Babu and I talk about this all the time, and we don't just envy the circumstance that allowed them to do that. We envy their guts, because I don't think we're a patch on them just for guts. I mean, talent aside, we're neurotic pleasers, you know, and I think we take that idea that you know we're not going to be liked sometimes way too much to heart. We tried. I don't want to overstate or understate the case in describing how we write, but watching sort of the purity of their belief in what they're doing, I'm filled with envy on that level.
That's so cool. I was going to say at the beginning, write down some of these movies if you haven't seen them. I know that I'm going to, because I think this is a great way to find out, you know, what you're going to put on your Netflix queue.
And it's in black and white. Don't get scared.
What about you, Nick? I like this thing that you started to say about the guts. Is there a screenplay where you feel it took an extraordinary amount of courage for them to?
Somebody else?
I was asking Nick.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We'll come back to you, though, because I want to hear your answer.
Is this thing working? Okay.
Yeah, it's on.
I'm not a very analytic person. I always forget to try to figure out what it is that's going on. I just am eating the popcorn. So I guess I don't think in terms of guts. I just think in terms of wonder. And I don't think I envy. I was never depressed by a great work of art, no matter.
That's great.
I always feel exhilarated. What depresses me is pieces of shit. And I said, they made that instead of what I can do? That's terrible.
We could have done a panel on movies we wish we hadn't written.
Well,
yeah.
I was going to say, just talking about this Billy Wilder stories, is that, of course, Wilder had on his office wall a framed little piece of paper that said, "What would Lubitsch do?" Because
we have to have our bigs.
Because just as Wilder for probably us is the ne plus ultra, Lubitsch for Wilder was the ne plus ultra.
Uh-huh. That's a great point.
I'm not a very, I don't envy, no, I just get jazzed and excited and happy and
Well,
like
tell us
that.
about a movie that you got jazzed and happy about.
Well, the first movie, when I was asked about movies I wished I had written, I didn't quite know what that meant, but the first movie that I wished I had written is in Italian, and I don't speak any Italian. Well, I speak opera Italian. Traditor.
And menu Italian.
Menu Italian, yeah. Yehudi menu Italian. Thank you. There's a movie that no one here has ever seen, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, and it's called The Organizer. Yes. Okay, yes.
We have one yes. Yeah,
two.
Okay.
The Organizer is a movie that came out in the early 60s, directed by Mario Monicelli, who was also one of the screenwriters. And it starred Marcello Mastroianni in what I think is his greatest role. And here's the thing. I believe that one of the wonderful things about movies is that they have the great capacity to get you interested in something that you never thought you would be interested in your entire life. And yet, for 2 hours, it becomes the most important thing. And when I saw The Organizer, and don't fall asleep when I tell you that it's about a mill strike in northern Italy in around 1900 in Turin, Italy. And that's what the the subject is. But, you know, subjects never really matter in art. It's all about the doing. And this thing just sweeps you up into something that has the density, complexity, and unpredictability of a novel, of life unfolding. It has all these different characters. And the screenwriting is very bold. Was that part of the question? Bold, yeah.
Bold, yeah.
Okay, it's bold because people are introduced in a few short strokes, and suddenly there's this whole tapestry of people who either work at the mill or who run the mill. And you meet them, some of them you meet very late in the movie. They're suddenly, you know, the soldiers who are brought in, and one scene does it, you got it. And you're looking at life, and that's still my primary thing why I go to the movies, to look at life only sort of bigger.
Mm-hmm. That's great. What about you, Paris?
Bold, I think, is I took some time to try to think about the question, what do I wish I had written? And it took me back to, I actually took a look at lists, favorite lists and I went to the AFI Top 100, and then I went to the Writers Guild Top 100 Screenplays. And I'm gonna run them down for you, and there's no overlap. There's very little overlap in the top 10. AFI Top 100, starting with number 1, Citizen Kane, Godfather, Casablanca, Raging Bull, Singing in the Rain, Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia, Schindler's List, Vertigo, and The Wizard of Oz. WGA Screenplays, top number 1, Casablanca, Godfather, Chinatown, Citizen Kane, All About Eve, Annie Hall, Sunset Boulevard, Network, Some Like It Hot, The Godfather Part 2.
There's a lot of Billy Wilder in this.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe this turns into a Billy Wilder tribute evening. It would be pretty funny.
He made the best movie in every genre.
Well, then the key there actually is what really struck me the most about the movies. And I came up with my own sort of list, and virtually none of them on that top 10. And really almost in no particular order, but the movies that kind of twisted and turned something that had forced me to look at a genre in a new way. And that's really what I took away from kind of this assignment, was what movies had I watched over the span of my lifetime actually got me to stop and say, that's actually different. They're not necessarily the best written screenplays or even the best productions, but I determined, I dug deep and I said, the story, there was something about the story. The acting is always great, but the characters, the source is the characters on the page, but often when you see the movie, we're not talking about reading screenplays here. We're talking about watching movies. And so there's a transmutation between the script and what we all see and what we're judging. My top 10, right, of sort of genre-twisting movies that kind of got me to thinking, that's actually a cool way to have done that. I wish I had thought of doing that genre a different way. Again, in no particular order. Planet of the Apes, Scarface, 1932, not the Al Pacino. Night of the Living Dead, Blade Runner. This is Spinal Tap. Network and Battle of Algiers.
All right, that is an amazing list. That is so full of variety.
They all, absolutely, and they all forced me to look at their particular genres, and there's probably 2 or 3 in there that are sci-fi, but they all twisted the genre just a little bit. And again, they're not all great movies when you dissect them as all of you will dissect movies, but in terms of taking a known genre and tweaking it enough to where it set it on a new path, that's what excites me. That's what I wish I had the wherewithal to have done that.
It's that you know, you have the wherewithal. It's just that that idea happened.
Right, exactly.
Happened to them. But I like what you're saying because it makes you realize that it sent you back to look at the writing. It took you back to the
Exactly.
genesis of the idea.
And that was, I'm sorry.
All right, go ahead.
And that's, well, just quickly, that's really what was key in looking at these, because I try to peer behind the actual movie, the finished product, and actually see the work, to see what potentially was on the page.
Very cool. David, you had something to say.
By the way, I love the fact that, whoa, I love the fact that you put in Battle of Algiers. Great movie.
Brilliant.
Good man.
Right, exactly.
Was that on your list too?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Why?
And it's, why? Because, okay, I kind of looked at your question and I interpreted it somewhat differently. I thought, okay, this is not a list of the world's best movies. It's not even a list of the world's best scripts. You're asking, what are the scripts that I would like to have written? And so I asked myself, well, why? And I realized that consistently, looking at the list that I chose, the reason I was choosing these movies was that they changed one. You were a little different leaving the movie theater than you were going in. And if a movie does that, to me, it is really sublime. And those are the ones I would really have liked to have written. So actually, the first film on my list is Bambi. Because if I had written Bambi, Bambi's mother wouldn't have died. And
So that's the thing you would have done differently.
yeah, I wouldn't have been scarred for life, and nor would millions of other children. Movies.
But that was guts at the
Yeah,
time.
that was
Yeah,
guts.
that was guts at the time.
Movies
That's right.
do have a profound effect.
In the new Star Trek, the guy goes into the radiation room, but he doesn't die either.
Don't say these things because
Spoiler alert
I
after
haven't
the fact.
seen it yet.
Nobody dies in movies anymore.
Yeah, but he wasn't a deer.
Hey guys,
It depends on your orientation.
Yeah, yeah.
you're drifting. You're drifting. Let's go back.
Well, you know, and then there are other movies like, it would have been kind of cool to have written Ishtar or Gigi, you know, known for that. If you wrote that, you know, at least you're known. You're really well known.
So any notoriety is really worth it.
You made
Yeah.
a terrible mistake. You didn't limit the number of movies we could put on this list. So I have 532, but
Well,
I will do them in small bites if you'd
yes,
like.
give us one and tell us why.
Okay.
Someone take his glass from him so he can hold the microphone.
By the way, that's not wine, it's blood. Okay, well, let me just do four in a bunch. Two go to Jean Renoir, Grand Illusion and Rules of the Game. Those are movies that change you as a human being. You can't conceivably see those movies and walk out the same as you
Rules of the
walked
Game
in.
is my favorite.
Yeah, isn't that just...
That's my favorite.
just
Was that on
great
your
stuff.
list too, Nick? Rules
No,
of
it
the game.
wasn't on my list because it was a different way of interpreting the categories.
the
But so you're not
yeah.
having
If you
list
said to me,
envy.
"What's your favorite movie?" I would say Rules of the Game is
Yeah.
my favorite movie.
It tells you more about human nature and how to write character than any movie. And Rules, you know, The Grand Illusion, my gosh, to make you feel empathetic and to like Erich von Stroheim, the man you love to hate, is a really brilliant piece of writing. That's...
For those
That's
of you who
great.
can't place Erich von Stroheim, he's the butler in Sunset Boulevard.
Right, but he's the commandant of the camp. And then I wanted to, in this group, pick out an American movie. And to me, one of the greatest examples of a really well-made American movie is Bad Day at Black Rock. I mean, that thing is airtight. You can't get a knife blade in between the bricks there. There are no seams. It's seamless. And it also made me at least, take a completely new look at what America was doing with our Japanese brethren during World War II, the Japanese Americans. And besides, for 120 minutes, you're just waiting and waiting for this one-armed guy to take down the town bully. And finally, in one of the greatest barroom fights ever filmed, he really does a job on him. It's great. Then surprisingly enough, in this little cluster here, I put in Les Miserables. And I do not mean this year's attempt. There was a Les Miserables done in '95, written and directed by Claude Lelouch. And it was brilliant. It took the Victor Hugo story and it transposed it to the days leading up to, during, and after World War II. And not only is it just a sublimely great film starring Jean-Paul Belmondo, but it really is one of the greatest lessons of how to adapt a book or anything, and just give it a change, just make it different, and yet it's true to the original. It's a brilliant piece, and I recommend it. I'll come back.
I know. We all are going to have a chance. There are so many. Let's talk about them. What you got, Nick?
Well, the movies that I wrote down, and again, remember, not a very analytic person, so I told you about The Organizer. My other movie I put down here, I put down Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which is just one of my other absolute all-time favorite movies. And when I introduced it at the Academy a couple of years ago, I said, one of the reasons I love this movie is that if I were trying to explain America to a Martian, this is the movie I'd show him, because this has everything about us in that movie. It has the sublime, it has the ridiculous, it has the idealistic, it has the vulgar, it has the pure, it has the corrupt, it has the hilarious, it has the pathetic, and everything about our culture, even including, you know, a media baron you can love to hate, is in that movie. So I put that down, and I was just amazed at how, you know, the thing about great art, and we now can talk about movies as art, we didn't used to be able to until there was, you know, videotape, because the movie would come out and disappear and that was it, unless you saw it chopped up on television. But now you can go back and revisit all kinds of movies. That's what DVDs and Blu-ray have done. So you can look at it like you look at a painting, and some ones that you thought were great don't hold up, and others. But the thing about great art is it doesn't date. You don't say about Mozart, an oldie but a goodie. All right, so another one. Most of the movies I picked were black and white, but there were two colors. The Bridge on the River Kwai, one of my all-time favorite movies, and a study and adaptation. You can learn something. In the novel by Pierre Boulle, who, by the way, won the Oscar for this, which was interesting, because Pierre Boulle doesn't speak English. So he didn't write the screenplay, and he was embarrassed about the Oscar, and he put it in his garage. The screenplay was written by two Americans who were blacklisted, Michael Wilson, who also wrote Friendly Persuasion and half of Lawrence of Arabia, and Carl Foreman, who wrote High Noon and The Men. And these guys were living in exile and wrote under pseudonyms. I was at the Academy about 20 years ago when the widows of Michael Wilson and Carl Foreman received posthumous Oscars in Pierre Boulle's novel. And Pierre Boulle, by the way, wrote also The Planet of the Apes. They don't blow up the bridge. No. So as a feat of screenwriting, you say, well, in a novel, yes, they don't have to blow up the bridge. And in The African Queen, they don't have to sink the Louisa in the novel. But in the movie, if you have the rifle over the mantelpiece, we all know that it has to go off. So what is the subject of Pierre Boulle's novel is the insanity of war. So the challenge for the screenwriters is, how do you remain true to Pierre Boulle's theme and they still blow up the bridge? And remember that the last line of the movie is madness. Madness. One of my all-time favorite pieces of screenwriting. I also put down Manhattan by Woody Allen, and I don't know why, but it just makes me so happy. When I hear the Gershwin on the track and I look at it and I just think it's great. Anyway, I put down Duck Soup.
Was Duck Soup on yours too, Lowell?
No, my list is actually very literal, based on the topic. I really tried to limit myself to, first of all, to comedies, because that's all I've ever written, and to movies, the type of movie, even if it was decades before I was born, that it was very much a movie that I could imagine trying to do.
Nobody wrote Duck Soup. There's no question about it. That was
yeah,
a gift
that
from
was
the
actually
gods.
a non-written movie.
However, Duck Soup happened.
But I really tried to discuss with myself the concept that yeah, this is the kind of thing I would take a swing at, that I had like a prayer of coming close to. I could write a screenplay that maybe was a patch on this.
I never thought of any of that.
Yeah.
I just, just wrote down what I like. I had two more films, and I'll just say them. I like The Godfather 2,
Yeah.
which I just think is this amazing, again, the density and complexity of a novel, and a kind of nightmare version of the American dream, all sort of turned inside out, but you could sort of understand why. And lastly on my list is a movie called Odd Man Out, directed by Carol Reed, and written by F.L. Green and R.C. Sheriff with James Mason. It's the biggest, best manhunt ever put on film, and as the movie goes along, everything becomes increasingly surreal and operatic, and I love this gradual transition into a sort of dreamlike place, and by the time it ends, you're in Puccini land. It ends like Tosca.
Oh my God, that sounds great. I've never seen that.
Odd Man Out?
Yeah.
Don't sleep.
Oh.
Don't sleep until you've seen the movie.
Okay, good advice. I didn't mean to cut you off before, Nick. I was just going to come back to you. But go ahead, Lowell. Lowell said that he had a lot of comedies, and I'm very partial to people recommending comedies.
Yeah, and as I say, these aren't necessarily my 8 or 10 or 12 favorite comedies. I was really personal about this, and really was trying to think of something I could imagine writing, or something like it. Just let me digress for a moment. It's interesting you said Bambi before, because I have this theory that so many good movies are Pinocchio. That I always refer to a movie as a Pinocchio movie, which is somebody has to display some kind of courage so that they can become a real boy and stop being a wooden boy. If you ever noticed, there's a huge number of movies that one way or another are
Wizard of Oz
are that theme. You know, On the Waterfront, for instance. You know, when it's up at the end, that's a Pinocchio movie to me. But the movies that I feel sort of close to, they're sort of examples of the kinds of things that Bablu and I try to do. We started with The Apartment, and another black and white movie from the 60s, 1,000 Clowns, which is right, because again, it has kind of a perverse message to it, which is that love will kill you, and because it's about this comedy writer who is sort of dropped out. And it's okay, he can survive because he doesn't need anything. He doesn't need money, and he doesn't need fame. He doesn't need anybody to think well of him. He's fine. He's okay. Except he's got this nephew that he's been raising accidentally, and he has fallen in love with him. I like movies about father love anyway. That's a big subject with me. The welfare, child welfare is going to take him away. and he's lost all his defenses. The moat he's built around himself has been destroyed because of love, which I just think is fantastic. And the other fantastic thing about it is it has an ending that I've looked at completely differently based on the stage of life I've been in. When I was 16 years old and saw it for the first time, I thought it was a very sad ending, that he had been beaten, that this entire process had defeated him, and he had to knuckle under and kiss ass. And then, how God knows how many years later it is, I look at it and I go, well, he's discovered that there's something to live for and something to work for, and something that has value beyond himself. And everything he does, he'll know why he's doing it. And at any stage, you could think completely differently about it. And to go a little more quickly, I don't want to, I don't want to filibuster here. Mr. Smith goes to Washington. I've never met a comedy writer, especially of a certain age, who hasn't admired the sheer size of the balls required to have done the producers. Especially when you think back to 1968 and what was in the theaters, comedies at that time. This is before Woody Allen, this is before Saturday Night Live, this is before Animal House. This is, the top comedy stars of the 1960s were Rock Hudson and Doris Day, literally. It was a phenomenon. It would be more contemporary. Groundhog's Day, I think, is just, the craftsmanship of it, how the movie was propelled, even though the subject is stagnation and repetition. I just think that's so skillful. There's so much craft there. Lost in America. Albert Brooks, he does an amazing thing in that movie, among many amazing things, but one thing in particular that I really admire, talk about a perverse way of writing, these aren't, I don't think these are spoilers, but they save their money so they can drop out and they don't have to work anymore, and in 20 minutes she loses all their money at a roulette wheel in Las Vegas. And incredibly, 15 minutes after that, as an audience, you hate him instead of her. That, to me, is a miracle. He hasn't struck her. He hasn't used bad language at her. But watch it again or for the first time, and you'll see he's just so pissy that even though he's completely in the right, she's completely in the wrong, your sympathy is with her. I just find that there's just something so skillful about that. Heartbreak Kid, because it's funny.
The original.
Yes, the original. Because it's funny and you don't like anybody. To go a really kind of off-the-wall choice, Sons of the Desert, a Laurel and Hardy movie from 1 billion years ago. Their relationship is so amazing to me. And then for the sheer sort of craftsmanship of it, besides the fun and the charm, again, back to contemporary, I wish Bablu and I had written Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I just think it's so skillfully done. Besides the fact that it's really funny and it's so sweet, it almost requires the same kind of plotting as a mystery. I know there are no mystery elements in it, but to get them, to move them through the 100 minutes, whatever it is, from place to place, from crisis to crisis, that really takes a lot of craftsmanship. We've done that a few times, and it's the thing we always find the hardest to do. The humor is one thing and character is one thing, but when we really have to, it's just, different writers have different skills. When we really have to plot like that, it's an ordeal. And that looked just so, it flew. Yeah. So that's a little list.
That's actually the hardest thing, I think, that to really decipher is the structure and the pulse of the piece. And much of that has to do with the editing and also the direction. But the characters, yes. The story, yes. But I'm calling the structure the pulse, because that's really what will carry you in waves through a piece. and it will lift you when you need lifting, and it will lower you when the time is right. And it's the kind of thing where every writer, the pulse will be different for the very same story, given the very same cast, the very same set of characters. Just a tweak.
Yeah, well, we always say that the movie is a journey and who's taking us on this journey. And I think the sort of the common element in the list I did is I feel like I understand and could take a shot at writing the people in each of these movies that are responsible for the journey. But you know, to say that I could have achieved it, that's not the claim. It's just, you know, these.
Right, but it awakens kind of an appetite for that character.
Yes, very much.
In a way, yeah. I know what you mean by that. I want to come back to Duck Soup for a second because it showed up on a couple of lists. But we had a little exchange, like it was just genius when you say, where does it come from? It wasn't written. Do you think that it was actually not written? Do you think it was improvised?
It was
I had a friend who had a production company called Miracle Pictures.
Right.
And their sobriquet was, if it's a good picture, it's a miracle.
It's a miracle, yeah.
I think
And
that's from Sullivan's Travels.
Sullivan's Travels also, yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Every year when screenplays get nominated for movies, they send out copies of the screenplays to the people in the Academy. I don't know what the hell I'm reading. Because so many things happen between what the original screenplay was and the contents of what we can refer to as the answer print. So many contributions by, as they used to say, diverse hands, whether it's the editor, the producer, the guys writing the checks, who the hell knows? So that by the time you're reading this thing, you don't really know who did what. And in something like Duck Soup, I think, yes, I know Arthur Sheikman and Bert Kalmar and Harry Ruby get the screen credit.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one.
But who knows? You know, what Groucho
it's actually
said.
one of the first table comedy movies. I mean, they table it sort of like a sitcom. And Kalmar and Ruby, who wrote the songs, sort of wrote it a little bit like a theatrical musical comedy, in that they had the numbers and they wrote sort of scenes to bridge from one song to another. But it's really where there isn't actually kind of a standard writing credit. There's Kalmar and Ruby's credit, and then there's additional dialogue credit.
Arthur Sheikman.
Sheikman,
Yeah.
yes.
And the other thing about, the Marx Brothers is when they did, for example, Night at the Opera, when they moved over to Metro, they took those scenes from the movie and they played them up and down the California coast in vaudeville houses. And they changed things as a result. It was like previews. It was like out-of-town tryouts.
They traveled
so
the
they
big
would
block scenes.
They'd do the stateroom scene and see, what worked in Two Hard-Boiled Eggs and so on. So many hands. And by the same token, we were talking about the Battle of Algiers before. I'm not sure how that got written either. Whether Gilo Pontecorvo by himself or to what degree there was improvisation. And there are movies, John Cassavetes movies, where there's a lot of improvisation. At the end, somebody calls it a screenplay and there's a screen credit on it, but who knows?
Well, what I love about this idea of taking your comedy act on the road to sort of road test it is it gives you something that I think I've heard almost every screenwriter I know has said there's a piece missing on the way to the script becoming a movie, which is that unlike in the theater, we don't get to hear it aloud until they are making casting tapes and there's a table read, and then, oh my God, we're really making this movie right this very minute. So you don't have a lot of time to start saying, I got a second thought here. And I just, speak to that because I think that particularly in comedy, you kind of do want to see whether people laugh before you spend a lot of money committing it to the screen. Do you guys read your stuff aloud? Or?
We read our stuff aloud every day. as a matter of fact. And
But
we
before
also,
an audience.
No, we don't get into costume.
You have table reads before you roll.
No wigs or makeup, but we do. We read our work out loud to each other every single day, and our more successful films, for the most part, were rehearsed for a couple of weeks with cast ahead of time. Sometimes on location, sometimes just kind of in a rehearsal hall. Just put scenes up on their feet and had the actors go through them, not just for blocking, but to actually kind of hear and then take it. You know, if we were on the road, take it back to the hotel that night and rewrite like we were out of town with a show.
In my experience, the attrition rate for dialogue in a screenplay of mine between the first draft and the finished film is 50%. 50% of the words are going to go. They're either going to go before the rehearsal, during the rehearsal, during the filming, or during the editing.
That's right.
You just, learn, when the actor says to you at the table read, oh, this whole speech about the labor movement in America, I can do that with a look.
And they're right. Right. But you're right, Nick.
Well,
You're right.
It's actually, I think comedy is
I'll get to you.
you have such a unique advantage by putting it on its feet. And it's quantifiable. How many laughs are you getting, from at the table, where you don't necessarily have that advantage.
I'm sorry, but and as soon as you've cast somebody, you have taken on another writing partner.
That's
right. It's the comedy. I mean, to me, is so visceral that just the timbre of somebody's voice. It's different than me reading it across the table to Babalu in the morning. I have this Bronx Queens sound. That we don't want anyone to replicate, actually.
Right.
And it's just gonna, the joke may survive that change of noise, but it very well may not, and we have to be agile.
If nobody laughs at a comedy, it's hard to call it a cult film.
There was a table read of the King's Speech, and at the end, the producer on it, or one of the producers, came up to me, and he said, David, when you wrote that, did you realize it was so humorous? And I felt like strangling him. But, so it's good to have a table read, because the producer gets to find out that the movie's actually funny.
The other example of that, which is really interesting to me, is that I was the guy who restored the African Queen. I found out that it wasn't available, and it took me 6 years to restore the movie, and we did this documentary about the making of the movie. And as I alluded to before, in the C.S. Forester novel, they don't sink the Louisa. They die. And in all John Huston's movies, and John Huston is the director, all his movies are based on books. And they're all based on books about quests that fail. The gold dust blows away, Ahab and the whale, the asphalt jungle, the hot robbery, it always goes south. So the African Queen would have seemed to be a perfect John Huston vehicle, except that when they were in the jungle making the movie, and he watched Bogart and Hepburn playing, he said, holy shit, this is a comedy. This is a comedy. We cannot kill Charlie and Rosie. So it's the only John Huston movie that doesn't conform to, The Man Who Would Be King, where they go over a cliff. It doesn't happen because he said, oh my God. And they didn't know that until they were hearing the actors do it. So it's interesting, because if I understand you correctly, you knew that what you were writing was funny. Yeah. But not everybody always does. And it's something, there is a process of discovery, and you were alluding to it. When the actors when the body on the table starts to breathe, and the monster sits up, who's it going to be? And it may not be who you thought. It certainly wasn't who Victor Frankenstein thought. I think we're safe there.
Yeah, it definitely takes on a different life in the best possible way. I mean, people always talk about, yes, it is a collaborative art, and we are just kind of like the first station along the way, and it gets added to. So I'm curious also, when we start thinking about movies that we wish we had written, are there characters that just have stayed with you your whole life through your movie viewing? A character, a person that you think, I wish that I had created that character.
Zorba the Greek? Sorry, Zorba the Greek, who is on my list. Zorba is unforgettable. I actually had the opportunity of working with Anthony Quinn much later in his life. In fact, it was a time he was quite elderly, and he had just impregnated his 23-year-old secretary, and he was feeling very good about it. But he assured me that the Greeks had never had Greek dancing until he did Zorba. He had invented it. But yeah, it's a great character, and one that I would love to have written, as I would have Dürse Uzla, a Kurosawa film, written by Kurosawa. It was, in a certain sense, his greatest failure. It was such a commercial failure that he seriously considered committing suicide afterwards. And yet it's one of his greatest films. It really is. I urge you to go out and find it on Netflix or Vidiot's or something. But the characters there are so exquisitely drawn. It's just a sublime film.
Say again.
Dürse Uzla, I better spell it because I'm probably mispronouncing it. My Japanese isn't as good as it used to be. D-E-R-S-U, Dürsu, and then U-Z-A-I-A. It was made in '75, written by Kurosawa and Vladimir Arsenev. Another character I would love to have written is Aguirre, Wrath of God. Yeah. I mean, that, first of all, it's one of the great films of all time. But his character is so brilliantly done. I was writing Tucker at the time, and I was in Francis Coppola's editing suite and trying to get his attention, which was a little difficult. He kept on running Aguirre, Wrath of God over and over on the moviola, just this one scene. And I finally looked, and it's the scene on the river when the raft is filled with the monkeys. And he kept on saying, how did he get the monkeys to stay on the raft?
Glue.
The movie that, interestingly enough, this is rather late in the day, but in answer to the question, the movie you wish you had written or the movie you wish you were good enough to have written, is a movie that now occurs to me, it's always the last person to think about, called Tunes of Glory. Tunes of Glory is directed by Ronald Neame, screenplay by James Kennaway from his own novel. And again, when I tell you what the movie's about, you'll yawn. It's about a Scottish regiment in peacetime. And it is about two dueling colonels battling for control of this regiment. And one of them is a good old boy, hard drinking, rule bending, and the other one is an uptight martinet who has dreamed of commanding this regiment through all the days that he was a POW in the war. And both of them are a little bit crazy. And the movie plays out like a Joseph Conrad novel. You could imagine it as a play without too much difficulty. And it is such a study of these two characters on a collision course that each are powerless to prevent, and only one is going to come out of this. In fact, neither one of them comes out of it. It is mutual assured destruction. But it is deeply moving, it is fascinating, and it has an elegance and an economy of expression. And I don't know if you remember these days when the camera held still. Does anybody remember that? When you would just look at the person talking and and listen, and then, you know, look at what the other guy was doing. There's a lot of that. And I strongly recommend Tunes of Glory. I think it's a great sort of unknown, it's like the Kurosawa, which I will not endeavor to pronounce, you know, sort of unwatched, unremarked. But the thing about, you know, creating a work of art is that even if it flops, and let's remember that, you know, Stravinsky's Rite of Spring was booed at its premiere, and 30 years later it was the soundtrack to Fantasia. So the artist who created it will always have the last laugh because he created it. And as long as people watch movies and as long as movies are preserved, the movies we talk about are movies that you can see, and they'll be good for you. They'll make you feel good. They'll make you feel happy. Even if you're crying, being sad is not the same thing as being depressed.
Yeah.
Oh, one last on the unforgettable character. I wish I'd written
Who's that?
Cool Hand Luke.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Frank Pearson. Got to give it up to Frank. Paris, give us a character.
I'd go back to Scarface, the original Scarface.
Paul Muni.
Yep, Paul Muni. I think one character who basically held focus for the entire movie. Now, Paul Muni wasn't exactly the best actor, but the character, I think, was riveting. And I think he occupied the space of that movie completely. And it was, you know, he had quite a range to handle, and I think at the time, we're talking 1932, it was pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Well, do you have a character for us?
No, you know, I was just thinking that it probably says something not that flattering to myself. I tend sometimes to think more of rather than characters I wish I'd written, but jokes I wish I'd written.
Give us a joke you wish you'd written.
Oh God, you know, I didn't name any Woody Allen movies simply because I consider those to be Woody Allen movies. Like only Woody Allen can write a Woody Allen movie, so I sort of stayed away.
Very personal,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, very personal. But like he has these little jokes sometimes show up that my jaw drops. He's one of his less popular movies. I can't remember which one it was, but his niece, young niece that he has a close relationship with, tells him she wants to go into show business, and he says, "Oh, don't go into show business. It's terrible. It's dog eat dog. It's worse than that. It's dog won't answer. Dog won't return other dogs' phone calls." And every once in a while, I just hear a joke, and it's such a bell. It has such a bell-like sound to it. You know, like Mark Twain. You know, Wagner's music isn't as bad as it sounds.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's joke writing to such a level of perfection that I wince a little because you just go, boy, that's. But I mean, as far as characters, I kind of almost every movie I named before was based on the fact that I would like to have written the character more than anything else. I would like to have written, you know, Murray Burns in 1,000 Clowns. That's why I would like to have written that movie. You know. So that's kind of the source of my entire list.
I get it. What about
Well,
this?
sometimes some of the best comedy lines are in films that aren't considered comedies. I mean, take Sweet Smell of Success, which is on my list. You've got lines like cats in the bag and bags in the river. I'd hate to take a bite out of you. You're a cookie full of arsenic. You're dead, son. Get yourself buried.
Clifford Odets.
Yeah, Clifford Odets. I love this dirty town. Ernest Lehman, Clifford Odets. And some very great lines.
Yeah.
A serious film and a wonderful one.
So for me, what I hear at the end of the day is that...
Is it the end of the day?
It's the end of our day because we're going to open to questions. But before you get excited, there's a little something else. I see a hand in the air already. This is how ready we are to go. For me, the takeaway is that you might start with, oh, dang, I wish I'd written that. But you end with, God, that was good.
Yeah.
We're so lucky that so many giants have come before us. All right, so here's the thing. If you want to ask a question, someone's going to give you a microphone, but the first thing you have to do is name a movie that you wish you had written. Then you can ask the question. All right, so let's... Okay, this gentleman here. No, this guy first, sorry. That guy first. Hand is up first. Then this gentleman.
Definitely, I wish I would have written Casablanca. I think that's the greatest film ever written. I mean, it was just unbelievable. The question I wanted to ask you is, what is the most important thing you learned being a screenwriter from your first big check to sitting in this chair? The most important thing you learned as a screenwriter, whether it's creatively, business-wise.
From your first paycheck to sitting in this chair, he added.
Do you enjoy the business? That was probably, do I really enjoy this business, the process? From the beginning of wanting to be in the business, wanting to be a writer, being paid for writing as a professional, to getting that check. A lot of water has been under the bridge. It's whether is this business for you?
And did you find out that it was or that it wasn't, Paris?
Jury's still out.
The jury's still deciding.
Right. Years later, the jury's still out.
Okay. All right, let's have from one more panelist, and then we'll move on to
I would say embrace the idea of rewriting, and not always because of ideas you yourself have generated. It's you have to be nimble.
All right, that's good. This gentleman here.
With the movie that I wish I have written was probably Heat by Michael Mann.
Oh, cool.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. My question is, we're talking about envy. Has envy ever hurt you professionally or personally, and how have you recovered from that? You know.
Joined AA.
Get up every morning.
Any other thing?
As I say, I don't envy. I get depressed when when I go to see a crappy movie and I go, how come they did that and they didn't do mine? Right?
So you're envious of the opportunity, but not the film.
Yeah,
right?
no, I agree. I've never been like really eaten up to, oh, look at all the success they're having. Wow, but like just what you said, every once in a while you go, how, why, what for?
I think, first of all, I don't know anybody. La Rochefoucauld once said, it is not enough to succeed. A friend must also fail. But I don't really know anybody who goes to the movies to have a bad time. I don't do that. I'm paying the money, I'm buying the popcorn, and I really, whatever. I'm not sitting there we've already established that I have no analytic ability. Anyway, I either am having a good time or I'm not having a good time. And I think envy is something I distrust as a drain on your energy or something. It's just like, it's a waste. I don't know where it would get you. I have no idea where it would get me, so I don't do it.
Where it will come, I believe, as a writer, is when you are replaced. And it'll happen to all of us, and it'll happen to all of you. And it's not necessarily envy unless they're replacing you with someone that you admire or admired before they replaced you. But that's the knife in the soul.
Well, envy is a human emotion. I'm not down on any of the emotions. I think they're all good. But some of them are funnier than others, and I think that envy is funny. And for me, with Ruth Prajabala, it evaporated instantly. It was just like, fade in. I'm in your hands, Ruth. I love you.
You ever see a picture called Theater of Blood?
No, what is that?
Theater of Blood is a wonderful horror movie that starred Vincent Price as a great Shakespearean actor. I think his name was Edward Lionheart. And he failed to win the equivalent of the Tony, whatever it was, and they gave it to somebody, and he murdered all the critics by using the method in Shakespeare's plays.
Oh, brilliant.
And Diana Rigg plays his daughter. And it's hilarious because the bloodier, meaner, more violent it gets, the more true to life, you know, and the basic relationship between the artist and the critic. And I don't know why I brought this up, but I just thought it was like a cool movie.
The human emotion. Okay, we've got someone here.
As far as the film, I guess I wish I would have written probably be a face in the crowd. Yes. My question is, do you find that you have a process, or does the story sort of dictate what your approach is?
You're talking about a writing process.
Yes, in terms of a writing process.
I think it depends on, first of all, what you're writing. If you are adapting a piece of material from someplace else, that suggests one kind of process. If you're spieling something out of your tush, that suggests something entirely different. I do think that A Face in the Crowd is the greatest unknown American movie, without question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't find that the process changes, because I find that my process, or at least the one that I've come upon, I need to apply to everything. So my first task is, why do I want to write this movie, aside from getting the check? No, seriously, why do I want to tell this story, and what is the movie about? So I always set about trying to formulate in one, or at the most 2 concise sentences, what the movie is about. If I've got that, then I know that I can write the movie. If I don't have that, I know I'm in deep trouble. I then always try to find my penultimate scene. What is my big, big climactic scene? Because if I know what the end is, gee, then I know how to start and move towards it. And then, being anal retentive, I do 3x5 cards, and I do a full structure every time, whether I need to or not.
Yeah, either thematically or structurally, we know what the end of the journey is. You know, it's a lot of we specifically need to know that, to not to know what you know. If you leave Los Angeles, we're winding up in Las Vegas. You know, it's how we get there is the fun. But and then there have been occasions where we didn't get there, where we listen to our characters, and occasionally they tell us they don't want to take that trip, and we'll wrestle with them for a while, and we'll see who wins. But it's really important for us right from the start to have a pretty solid idea of where the movie is ending.
It's what is the story? It's, you know, you almost, for me, whether it's an adaptation or an original, I want to tell this, I tell myself a short story. How can I tell this story, that I'm about to write, this movie, and how can I put it in a paragraph as an ultra short story? What's the story here? Until I know that, you know, there's no script. There's nowhere to go.
I would like to interject one observation about all this. I assume that everybody here gets to sleep in their own way. Some people lie on their back. Some people face plant in a pillow. Some people wear a sleep mask or whatever. You have to do what works for you to get you there. And we can supply all kinds of anecdotal evidence. He uses 3x5 cards, I don't. But the takeaway from this should not, I think, be how do we do it. All you have to offer as writers is you. And you know, you might get sort of helpful ideas up here of things that you might want to try, but at the end of the day, how you do it will be your own process, as individual as going to sleep. And there are no answers in that sense. I think.
That is a great answer. We have a question in the very back of the room. This lady with the glasses on has had her hand up for a while.
Well, among all the, I mean, what I'm so inspired by is how many great films there are, and we could probably go on all night. Off the top of my head, Witness would be the film I would have been privileged to have written. And with that said, I say it only because I don't have the audacity to suggest I would wish that I had written every great Buster Keaton feature that he ever made. So that's my question to you is, for any of you gentlemen, are silent films a part of your great inspiration? And if so, what films did you wish that you would have written from that era?
From the Buster Keaton, from the silent era?
Yeah, from that whole era. Although a lot of those weren't written, they winged it, ironically. So, but from that era, if there's any of the films that inspired
Napoleon.
you.
Wow.
Well, I got pretty close with Sons of the Desert. I mean, I was that's pretty far back. It is a talkie, but it's very much in that tradition.
Birth of a Nation, believe it or not. The story being what it is, you can throw that out, but basically what the genre was, how it essentially explored the beginning of motion picture making. The process that is what we have today basically came out of those beginnings. So I think Birth of a Nation, Griffith did some other work that I think was brilliant, but Birth of a Nation was where he actually put it all together. Again, the story and the elements of the story, where you get into the political nonsense, is really, you have a tendency to dismiss some of the brilliance in the work.
Yes, City Lights.
Oh, you beat me.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go. Go.
You got to speak up quicker
Go,
now.
it's too late.
Go.
No.
Here's the thing I was going to say. This is a little involved, but all great artistic media rely for their success on something that they leave out. Paintings do not move. Music has no intellectual content. Words are just code. In each case, it is the imaginative participation of the reader, the audience, the viewer, the listener, that completes the whole thing. The painting moves when it meets your eye. Beethoven becomes profound when it hits your ear. Otherwise, it's merely catgut and tubing. The words make you laugh or cry when you decode what the letters are. Movies alone have the hideous capacity to do everything for you. But it was not always so, and this is what you're talking about. Once upon a time, movies didn't talk, and movies didn't have color. Movies didn't have 3D. And one could argue that with each of these additions, the thing got a little bit farther and farther away. And I would argue that in City Lights, the climactic moment between Virginia Cherrill and Charlie Chaplin, when each of them realizes who the other has the audience diving deeper into the screen than any other movie. And it's not that they're not good sound movies, of course there are. And it's not that they're not good color movies, of course there are. 3D, and I'm not quite sure what that's all about. But I would definitely name City Lights, and partially for that long-winded explanation.
That's beautiful. All right, let's see, right here in front. I'm pointing at you, this gentleman.
Well, I got a name too. One is Children of Paradise, and the other is Dr. Strangelove. But my question for each of you is not so much movies you wish you'd written, but is there a guilty pleasure, a movie you don't wish you'd written, but you just enjoy the hell out of, but can't ever get anyone else to agree? Something.
Absolutely.
Pink Flamingos.
Yeah.
All right, what is it, Nick?
I think I do wish I'd written it. It's called The Pride and the Passion, and it's Cary Grant, Sophia Loren, and Frank Sinatra. And I think it's a great movie, and I think every frame looks like Goya, and it has one of the great soundtracks ever written by George Antheil, with a little help from Manuel de Falla. And I think it's really great. And I watched Children of Paradise again last week from start to finish. So.
Do you have?
Yeah, I had actually 2 on my list of 537 films. And they're both written by the same person. Charade, made in '63, written by Peter Stone, and then Mirage in '65, written by Peter Stone. They are just so much fun. They are seamless. They are beautifully crafted. Everything works. It's funny. I mean, they're completely empty, but who cares? They're so much fun. It's either those 2 or Mamma Mia.
Okay, wait a minute, Lowell. Guilty pleasure.
Oh, vintage Jerry Lewis movies. Late 50s, very early 60s. You know, the Errand Boy, Ladies' Man, Rockabye Baby, Nutty Professor. Yeah, you know, I liked them when I was 7. They made me laugh. And if they come on TV, sad to say, pretty much the same thing will make me laugh now. And see, because I don't think that you had any reason to feel guilty about any of those pictures you named. This is a guilty pleasure.
Incomprehensible.
Yes.
All right, this gentleman here in the, oh, sorry. Do you want to finish? Do you have a little bit more to say?
Always.
All right, well, let's move on.
All right, so my voice is a little raspy. So it says, what makes a great movie? Now, I want to hear from all 4 of you guys what makes, now I want to, one word, what makes a great writer?
Wait a minute. What movie did you wish you had written?
Fargo.
Fargo.
It's on point.
Okay, so in one word, what makes a movie great?
No. In one word, what makes a great writer?
What makes a great writer? Okay.
Talent.
Brevity.
All right, Paris.
Talent.
Opportunity.
Opportunity. Let's hear it for that. What?
Luck and honesty.
That's 2 words, but
You get 2, but yeah, that's great. There is a lot of luck. Okay, let's see, where else?
Thank you.
Here, on this side of the room, we've got this gentleman right here in front wearing a necktie. He gets to, just because you wore a necktie.
I was wearing a necktie.
My favorite movie that I would have loved to have written was The Red Shoes. And I wanted to know, we talked about how many writers or movies that you wish you had done, but in the movies that you have written, were there any like certain lines that were clearly homages to scripts that you have read or movies that you had seen, and what are those?
That's a complex question.
Well, I mean, our first movie when we were just trying to figure out how to write a movie was clearly sort of a pale a copy of The Producers. We wrote a movie called Night Shift like 30 years ago, and if you watch that, you'll see that it's seriously influenced. People don't recognize it because it's such a completely different story, but that was clearly sort of, we were groping on we'd been in TV for years, how to write something long form, and so I know we were profoundly influenced by that.
The King's Speech I used as my template, My Dinner with Andre crossed with Rocky. I'm serious.
That's great.
Oh, I got one more. Can I?
Yeah.
We wrote a movie a long time ago called Parenthood, and we were very influenced by Hannah and her sisters. We loved the way he juggled the characters. They were sort of an extended family, and he popped from story to story. And we had this idea for a film on the topic that we wrote on, but we were inspired to try to make an attempt at that style, that kind of structure. That was a very big influence.
And Paris, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, there was a line that I've written in Tuskegee Airmen, the HBO movie. Are we to be Americans when the mood suits you? And where that came from was Spartacus, actually, from the early 60s.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, let's get some other, this gentleman here in the kind of gray shirt.
Thanks. The movie I wished I had written would be To Kill a Mockingbird. Yeah. And my question to you guys is, if you were totally independent and free of all the constraints of the Hollywood movie-making business and storytelling business, and you were free to live after it was done, produced, and distributed worldwide, is there a story or a movie that you would like to tell that right now feels like you just couldn't do it because this industry won't allow that story, that movie, to be produced and made and distributed?
Yes.
And what would that be?
There's a lot. One of the things I've noticed about, and you know, we're talking about movies in a sort of interchangeable way, but in fact there are many different sort of venues. There are studio movies, there are independent movies, there are foreign movies. And one of the things that I find very discouraging about what we call studio movies is that nobody seems to take seriously at all, as near as I can tell anymore, story. And I first noticed this about 20 years ago while I was watching Braveheart. And I thought, and you reminded me of this, these people do not care about William Wallace. They are not interested in Robert the Bruce or Edward I. They only want to remake Spartacus. That is not good enough. And the film lacks any conviction. It has the non-specificity of cafeteria food. Because no one in Spartacus, whether you like the movie or not, people were acting out of passion, out of great conviction. I mean, they may have been all communists, but they had real passion about what they believed. I mean, and the only thing that the Mel Gibson movie seems to believe is, I believe I would like to remake Spartacus. And a lot of studio movies that I see seem to mysteriously, they pay lip service to it, but nobody really cares about it. Not the way they cared about the guys who made the King's Speech, where their guts were on the floor for it, and it's obvious, and that's why people respond to it, or Slumdog Millionaire, where somebody really is caring. And the rest of the time, you know, in the words of Godfather 2, tell Michael it was just business. I forgot your question.
Okay. Let's move on.
You know, excuse me. My favorites are Napoleon and Lawrence of Arabia. I was wondering, you brought up the topic, I think, that I had a question about. Are there any tentpoles that were made, large studio movies made in the last 5, 10, 15 years that you didn't write that you might have liked to have written or to change?
Radio silence.
What kind of movies did he say?
Tentpole, studio tentpole movies.
Well, it's so far from what I've ever done, I can't even sort of, I always feel like those are being made in another
I did a
another end
tentpole
of the
movie
business.
by accident.
What was that, Nick?
The Wrath of Khan. I didn't know it was a tentpole, you know.
I think you stumped the panel. Okay, this gentleman on the aisle here.
You mentioned that a lot of films that you wish you'd done took the genre and tweaked it. When you're writing, have you found experience when you're writing a genre picture to tweak it or stay in the boundaries of that genre and not venture out completely?
You did not pay the toll?
A film I wish I made was Christopher Nolan's The Following.
The Fallen?
Yeah, The Following.
The Following.
The Following.
I don't think I saw it. If you don't break the genre, if you don't break the rules, don't bother.
Okay. That should be the goal.
What's the question?
Good.
Oh,
by the way, before you break them, learn them. This is what Stravinsky said at the University of Texas. First, you must learn all the rules so you can break them. Art does not happen by accident. That's Mrs. Meyer's oldest opinion.
I finally have an answer to the previous question, though.
Let's hear it.
Toy Story 3. I would really, that's a tentpole movie, and I think it's beautifully written, and I think Michael Arndt did a wonderful job. I wish I could have written that.
Yeah, wonderful.
I agree.
Let's see, we'll do one more question on this side. This lady here in the dark jacket.
Stand By Me is the movie that I wish I would have written. And my question for you, the whole panel, is what character or story do you think is responsible for us having the pleasure of seeing you on the panel tonight and hearing you speak? Which character or story made you a screenwriter?
That's a great question.
Could you say the question again? I'm sorry.
What story or character made you become a screenwriter?
That you wrote.
That I wrote or that I saw?
That you wrote.
That you saw.
It's very interesting. There's a book which you might find interesting called The Movie That Changed My Life. I think that's the name of the movie. And what they did was they asked a bunch of people, some well-known people and some not well-known people. I remember Bambi was one of those movies. To sort of free associate. Basically, I think the works of art that impress us the most are the ones we bond with when we are very, very young. And whether from, one of the movies I saw with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, my mother left me in the theater all day with that thing. By the end of it, I thought the Nautilus was my mother. And I bonded with it. But in fact, my relationship with film, my dad was a shrink. And he explained to me a phenomenon called counterphobia. And counterphobia is where the object feared becomes the object loved. First movie I ever saw, which was shortly after the Civil War, and we didn't have a television, so I had never seen anything like this, was I was taken to see Laurence Olivier in a movie called The Beggar's Opera. And the fact that the man was going to be hanged in the movie sent me screaming out of the theater in terror. The fact that it was a musical, The Beggar's Opera is really the first musical, so far from detracting from the level of reality, had the added effect of making it 10 times more real to me. That movie, for whatever it's worth, remains one of my favorite movies, and I'm in the movie business. That was the movie that has, and many, many years later, I took two very younger sisters of mine to see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And 5 minutes before the end of the first half of the movie, something that happened sent them screaming out of the theater in terror. And then after that, it was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang this and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang that. Counterphobia. Couldn't get enough of it. We had to get the sheet music. We had all the instruments. We played all the songs. So The Beggar's Opera, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, no question.
That is a brilliant analysis from a guy who says he can't analyze anything.
Because my dad explained it to me.
I love that explanation. What about you?
Yeah, first impressions are huge. My very first movie experience, I was on the boat crossing the Atlantic, and there was a movie showing, which of course I was not allowed to go to because I was a little tiny fellow. So I was wandering around, and I managed to kind of get lost, and I was looking for my parents. And I wandered into the big lounge where they were showing a thing called a movie. And here on the screen, I saw these giants. And it was Victor Mature and Wanda Hendricks. Because it left such an impression, I later did a search describing what I had seen, and people told me what the movie was. It was Victor Mature as a Indian sultan and Wanda Hendricks, and they were kissing, and that was love. And I've been looking for that ever since.
That is beautiful, David. What about you, Paris?
I think I would agree that it begins very early. And for me, though, the types of movies that were impactful for me, that I carried with me into a sense of that I think I might want to write, were always sort of the horror genre, and not necessarily good movies. Movies like Mighty Joe Young and The Crawling Eye. These are movies.
The classics.
Right, exactly. But these are movies that had me riveted to my seat. And even back then, I could probably figure that, there were some things that weren't quite good about them. But yet, any movie that makes you go home and lock doors and not get to sleep for hours, I mean, that's an impact. That's an impact. And that gave me a sense of these things can manipulate your emotions. Can I do that?
First, let me quickly answer for my writing partner, Babalu. He will talk forever about the moment as a kid he saw Some Like It Hot. And it just absolutely changed his life, and he knew what he wanted to do forever. My story is probably a little different in that I wanted to be a TV writer. I never really imagined being a screenwriter. My big influence was the Dick Van Dyke Show when I was like 12, 13 years old. I wanted to write that. But after I actually was writing TV for a few years, I was still very young, Annie Hall came out. So this is not a kid experience, because I was already in my 20s by then. But to refer to it as a game changer is really not giving it its due. Probably not since It Happened One Night has a movie been that big a game changer as far as comedy features are concerned. And I can remember virtually all of us who were in TV at the time kind of went, wow, that's where it's going to be. That's where we should be. We grew up on TV, but now this is where we should be.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, the counterphobia thing had enormous meaning to me because my parents took us all to a drive-in when I was about 7 years old to see Huck Finn. And at some point, they walk onto a riverboat looking for, I believe, Huck's dad or something, and they see a guy, he's got a bullet hole in his forehead. And it looked so realistic to me that I started screaming in the car. And I would not stop screaming. I screamed so much and could not be consoled. It was as if I had stumbled myself upon a dead body at the age of 7. We had to leave the theater, and I ran a fever after seeing it. It didn't become my favorite movie, but watching movies became my favorite thing after that.
That's counterphobia.
That's counterphobia. So when you were explaining it, I went like, that's absolutely brilliant. But I also had the experience, weirdly, of reading Little Women when I was 8 years old and reading it again when I was 9, right? So I'm reading it all the time, so it's my friend, and I know my friend. And then I see an adaptation of Little Women on television, I did not know that movies were written. No one had explained that to me yet. Novels were written and movies appeared magically and actors said the words. I watched it and I thought, that is not right. That is not what that book is about. That book is not about getting married. And when I found out that movies were written, I started thinking, I could write a movie one day of Little Women. It's really true. And I walked around with that book for the first 12 years that I was a professional, well-paid screenwriter trying to get someone to let me to make the movie. And it finally came into the right moment in the right hands. And I got to do it. So that was my happy ending.
You did the right one.
I felt like I had done Louisa May Alcott right, and these other people had done her wrong.
Where was the drive-in?
The drive-in was in Panama City Beach, Florida. All
My
right.
first job in television was writing episodes for the Little Women series that ran for half a season.
We're
due to my great efforts.
Paisano. Well, you guys have had such great questions, and I love all the movies that you were thinking about writing. And I say go write them if you're a writer, and definitely go watch some of these movies. I know I'm going to. Thank you all for just a very enriching panel.